What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Drums and Drams. We are live with a little bit of breaking news, although not totally breaking. This was earlier today that this kind of, came across people's social media feeds or appeared in your email if you're a member of the Four Roses Mellow Moments Club, which I am not a member. I have missed the opportunity to do that every time it's come up, which is kind of like an exclusive club that gets different perks through Four Roses. But we've got some big news coming to us from Four Roses today. Again, you may or may not have heard this already. It has to do with the mash bills that Four Roses produces. As many of you know, Four Roses has 5 different yeast strains and 2 different mash bills. The 2 different mash bills so far are considered the B and the E mash bills. And so if you see these kind of codes on the bottles, I've got a single barrel right here. This one in particular is OBSO. The B is going to stand for that higher rye mash bill. And then the last letter, O, in this case, is one of the 5 yeast strains. So that gives them 10 possible options to work with as a company. And many of you know this. The Small Batch Select, this is actually the Small Batch, the regular version of it. But the Small Batch Select is a blend, I believe, of 6 different of these mash bills and so on and so forth. There's all these different blends that go into the yellow label, the Small Batch Select. And of course, the single barrels have their own individual mash bill and yeast strain because it is in fact a single barrel. And finally, the limited editions each year are kind of a different blend with higher age statements. Now, what we've got today, I'm going to put this up on the screen for you. This is courtesy of, or really just kind of stolen from, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due. This is the Bourbon News Instagram page. And here we go. You can see on the screen, I'm gone, but what's in front of me is more important. Top left, B recipe. You can see those proportions here. All of these recipes have 5% barley, so just, let's get that out of the way. And so what we're working with here is 95%, the other 95% of the mash bill. The B recipe, the higher rye, is 35% rye, 60% corn. And the E recipe, which we know, is 75% corn and 20% rye. But now we have 2 new recipes that are announced from Four Roses. In the bottom left, you can see we've got 52 corn, 43 rye, and again, that 5 barley. So this is ultra high rye. I mean, this is about as high as they can make it with that 43% in the mash bill of that rye, while still being able to be called a bourbon. And in the bottom right, you can see we have a very corn-heavy mash bill. So you can expect maybe some sweeter flavors and a little less spiciness from this one. And we don't yet know what the numbers, or the letters rather, are going to be for these new recipes. We've got B and E already. Who knows what these new ones are going to be in that second slot of the 4 letter code that we have for all of the single barrels. I've got to say, myself, I'm excited for this. I would imagine they're going to do the same thing with the yeast strains as they do with the other 2 mash bills. So in total now, if they utilized all 5 yeast strains, they would now have 20 different possibilities for single barrel products. This gives them a lot more room to blend. Of course, with, even with that E recipe being 20% rye, that's still a lot of rye for their low rye product that they've traditionally had. That's still a lot of rye. So to actually see something, I'll put it back on the screen here, like that new recipe 2 in the bottom right, only 10% rye in the mash bill and 85% corn. I'm very curious to see how this kind of a product, is going to taste, because we know Four Roses for their spiciness, for that rye forward profile. So to get something like this, it's probably going to be a little on the sweeter side. I think it's exciting. It's interesting. I myself actually prefer the B mash bill, the higher rye, 35%, over the E. A lot of people like the sweetness of the E mash bill, less spice. I actually prefer the rye heavy stuff. So this new mash bill that's got 43% rye, I think that one is very intriguing. Now, what's interesting to me also is the proportion of that rye mash bill here in the bottom left corner, that rye heavy one. That's very, very, very close to the Sagamore rye mash bill that the Bourbon Junkies actually source from Sagamore, which is something in that same ballpark, 53, 42, something around those proportions. Very close. So over time as these products come out from Four Roses, that'll be an interesting comparison, I think, to make between those two distilleries. So Marshall says, question is, do they already have barrels laid down with the new mash bill for a few years, or are they just now starting? That is a good question. And, some of these communications here, I have a few screenshots that I picked up from the Bourbon Real Talk community Facebook group. It looks to me like there's some access to folks to be able to taste this stuff, but they don't mention what the age is. If it's going to be, just the white dog, or if it's going to be something, barely aged, I'm not sure yet. So if anybody does happen to find out, whether you're watching this live or watching the replay, please drop that in the comment section. I'd be curious to know, as more comes out about this, if we find out that it's going to be, something that's been on deck for a few years and it's been in the barrel already for 4 years, or if this is something that's just now being finalized and confirmed for production in the future. I don't think we really have any idea, but we just saw hitting the shelves this 10-pack of all of the, current iterations of their products and those little samples, and you can do like the giant 10-pack side by side to taste all of the different yeast strains and mash bills. Well, now they're going to have to double that. So the already high price of, between $120 and $150 for that 10-pack is going to probably double if that ever hits the market as a full 20-pack. So anyways, interesting news out of Four Roses. Big news, the addition of 2 new mash bills. And I'll say this here at the end of the video, I'm not sure when the last time such a big change actually took place for them. Obviously, over the years, what's happened with Four Roses has been interesting, right? The distillery back in the 40s, 50s, 60s was doing really well, but as the countercultural movement started, 60s, 70s, you started seeing everybody shift over to clear spirits, and with that, a shift away from bourbon. At that point, Four Roses started making light whiskey. They were doing stuff that was basically barely better than vodka, right? And, before that, they had a blended product that was considered a rye, but seemed to be a blend of bourbon and rye, but still got them over the percentages required to call it a rye on the label. And those bottles were, back in the 40s. I've actually tried a 1941 Four Roses rye, which is what I'm talking about. Super interesting to see a rye from them. Now, I'm not exactly sure along the way, as we started falling away from bourbon here in America, all the Japanese exports started happening. Eventually, Four Roses gets sold from Seagram's. Kirin acquires them. I don't know at which point we actually started to see the 5 yeast strain 2 mash bill thing completely take over and become the crux of what they produce. So if you do happen to know that as well, that would be something interesting to drop in the comments section. But either way, with their history, I think this is kind of one of the biggest steps to open up to new mash bills, certainly in the last several decades, and I don't know, again, how far back that extends. So for me, this is going to be great. I have a few favorite of their current mash bills that I like, and yeast strain combos. OESQ is my only E that I like. Otherwise, I'm more of an OBSK kind of guy, OBSF. I like those quite a bit. So anyways, drop your favorite recipe in the comments. Cheers, guys. Thanks for checking out this quick little bourbon news. We kept it under 10 minutes. And now I've got to jump over to the Patreon page where I've got some barrel pick news. We're dropping a Dark Arts single barrel 10-year MGP bourbon this week. And the Patreon members are going to find out about that and some other exciting news related to the Middle West pick. And I'm also picking a barrel this Wednesday. So cheers, guys. Wrapping up with a little OESQ here in the glass. Cheers, and I'll see you next time here on Drums and Drams.